Hello
Hi, again.
again. It is so great to be back with you.
Yeah, this
I'm
is gonna
very
be a fun
excited.
day. Yeah, this is one of my all-time favorite people. I can't wait for this conversation.
Amazing. This is going to be one of my favorite yet. I am really excited for us to be joined soon by our special guest, Chris Heeter. But first, we wanted to start with an intro video, and then I'm excited to hear the intro that you have for her after. So we'll go ahead and get started with that.
There's this moment when the dogs are on the line, barking, lunging, excited. It's the moment you pull the quick release and everybody starts to pull. Suddenly, it's quiet. Just the sound of runners on the snow, the dogs breathing, all their energy focused on a single purpose: pulling the sled. Imagine everyone on your team pulling to their potential, harnessing the energy of each individual. It's powerful. It's wild. Wild means having the courage to bring the gift of all of who you are to all of what you do. It's knowing my job as a leader is to drive the sled. I'm not out front dragging the team along. My place is behind them, supporting them as they do their job. Now's your moment. It's time to let go of how you've always done it and make way for something new, maybe even disruptive and energized. Something wild. It's time, isn't it? Time to bring more wild to your organization.
So cool.
Amazing. I'll never get tired of that definition of leadership where she's behind the sled. Well, y'all just got a glimpse of Chris Heeter, one of the many sides of Chris Heeter. She's a leadership speaker, a wilderness guide, a poet, and as you've seen, a dog musher. As an environmentalist, Chris's commitment to sustainability runs deep. From her home life to sitting on boards of environmental organizations to training and volunteering to help reduce our collective carbon footprint. I think we've all felt the weight of this issue, especially maybe in the last couple of years, and certainly now, but at least I have also wondered how I can possibly make a difference. Chris believes our industry has the power to influence significant change. We're going to talk about that today, where carbon neutral events become the norm. Today, we're going to chat with her about how we can make this important global issue more personal and find the motivation to be part of this important shift, starting with our own industry.
Amazing. I'm so excited. Welcome, Chris. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks very much. It's fun to be here. This is something,
We have to get introduced. So this is Summit.
Yes, he's my sleepy sidekick, I call him.
Oh my goodness.
He makes everything better. Just so you know.
He does.
Truly.
Yeah, you'll see somebody going, is that stuffed or real? He's real.
Oh my goodness. It is going to be hard for me to focus, but I will.
Yeah, we're going to try a little extra. So I'll try to get us right into the questions. Maybe that'll help.
Yeah.
Many know you from your work with the sled dogs and how that work relates to leadership and teamwork, which to me seems sort of obvious, but maybe it isn't always. That's also because I know you've spoken about for years. What we want to highlight today is your commitment to sustainability, because that is not probably so obvious before people work with you, and how that topic finds its way into your keynotes, both Wild Leadership and Wild at Work. Maybe we should start by asking where the wild comes from. I know it's in your company name, Wild Institute, and we just mentioned your keynote titles. Can you maybe tell us about that?
You bet. It started out way back when I began my business. WILD was an acronym for Women in Leadership Development. And for a while, that worked really well for me. But as I grew and expanded and learned and found much more avenues for how and where I wanted to speak and guide trips, that didn't fit anymore. But thankfully, the word wild has beautifully followed me this whole way. So it now doesn't have an acronym anymore. It's just WILD. And WILD kind of in a nutshell, it's who you are. It's nothing to fix or improve or reach for. It's just you, right? Beautiful, messy, natural, original you. So being wild means having the courage to bring the gift of all of who you are to all of what you do. So that's what I focus, no matter what my topic is, that's kind of the overarching theme, is how can we show up more wild, more real, more authentic, all those things, but really coming from here.
That's incredible. And speaking of where Wild originally came from, women in leadership, that's amazing. You've been busy taking women on some canoe trips this summer. Is that correct? I'd love to hear more about that.
Somehow, this is my 41st year guiding women's trips, which
No way.
crazy to think about. But yeah, so for example, this summer, I only do a couple now because speaking takes a lot of my time, but I always carve out some time to do trips. So this year was a Boundary Waters trip, which is the border of Minnesota and Canada. So a week canoeing up there. And then I just recently got back from Wabakimi Provincial Park. So far north Ontario, where you get a very long, bumpy shuttle into the park. And then we get picked up by seaplane and fly back after a week canoeing. So I will always make time for some of those trips just because it's at my heart. And then the rest of the time I give to speaking.
I want to sign up for the next one.
Have fun.
Chris.
That sounds amazing. Will Summit be there?
No, I would be a terrible guide if I had Summit, because I know how cute he is. Where's Summit? I would not pay attention to the people. So,
I totally get that. Well, I want to talk about your commitment to sustainability as well. Like Chris said, maybe a lot of people don't know, how much your commitment runs deep. So this shows up in both your Wild Leadership keynote and your Wild at Work keynote, right? Love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's not a major theme unless they want it, but you can't help but weave it in because it's such a good fit with leadership, right? With how we show up, how we hold on to hope and all those things. So typically I'll talk about being wildly present, wildly original, and wildly welcoming as how we sort of hold that as leaders or for a work culture, that sort of thing. And it shows up in wildly original because I think sometimes we show up to work and we have this big passion, something we really care about, and it doesn't feel like it fits at work. So we leave it at home and we go do our work, and then we come back and we engage in whatever that is. And I just think, if you're really passionate about something, I'll bet there's a fit. And that's what I found for myself, was that I could no longer kind of ignore the impact our industry has on the environment and just go along speaking as if I wasn't noticing all of the impact. So once I brought my passion into the speaking, it's just a great example for people to follow their own passions, right? And be able to bring that into their workplace as well.
Right. That's fascinating. And yeah, I think your sustainable speaking initiative, which I'm going to ask you to explain in a minute, is one of the coolest things, and separate from your keynote, but one of the coolest things I've ever seen a speaker do with a client. I'm not kidding. I mean, it just kind of blew. The first time I saw it, it just blew my mind. You talk about it as your skin in the game approach, which I think is accurate and exciting. But can you explain to everybody else how it works? And then we'll dig a little deeper. Okay.
Yeah. So for years, I was speaking and trying to kind of, like I said, keep not looking at the basics, which is the plastic water bottles, the this, the that. And it was a disconnect, and I couldn't live with it anymore. So I spent 2 years researching what could I, and then this industry I'm a part of, do to move the needle, to have an impact positively in terms of the environment. And there's a lot we can do. So 2 years of research. Now it's all on my website under sustainable speaking, which means it's full of research and ideas and suggestions. But then there's also a checklist. So when you hire me to speak, you can download this checklist, and there's a whole bunch of ideas in every area. So from the venue to transportation to food and beverage to displays, all of it, and suggestions of what you can do. And you can check off the various things you're going to do for this event. It relates to points, which relates to a percentage of my speaking fee that I give back to you to use toward that event. Because I want to be in it too. I'm not going to just sit here and say, you ought to do these things, right? I want to be part of it with you. And so we talk well before the event, and I'll go through it with you, and we'll come up with different ideas that might not even be on the list, so that we can do the very best with whatever your venue is at the time or that kind of thing. So it's exciting and fun, and you can tell I get really jazzed about it. And so far in getting to do this with planners, we have a blast. And it's like, wow, I never thought about that. And that doesn't sound that hard. And we begin to move the needle. So I'm thrilled. It's like a win in every direction. And then I get to brag about it, right? So whatever you've done as a planner, while I'm speaking, I'll point it out. And then people look around. And I think everybody wants to take care of their home, really. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know a person who feels like, well, I think we should be ruining the earth. It's not where we come from. So even if the attendees aren't aware of it initially, if I pointed out what we did and what your organization did, everybody feels better. It's just a win in every direction.
Right. I mean, I can see it's just obvious, like for those companies that kind of go all in on this, that it's entirely different than simply listening to you talk about it, and certainly you're going to learn something, but they're getting the firsthand experience themselves and then giving themselves a jumping off point to take it to the next level, hopefully. And I don't know how you couldn't once you realize you actually can make a difference. Getting leaders, employees, planners, all them involved gives them hope, I think, that they can actually make a difference. But apart from all of this, I mean, I'm just going back to, apart from all of this, like it really does seem like insurmountable and something that I struggle with. How do I personally make a difference?
It is really hard. And I would love to hear too about maybe first, if you could share some real stories and accounts of this sustainable speaking in action. And then maybe the shift you saw in people saying like, wow, we really can make a difference in this. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. How long do we have? It's just, like I said, it's so rewarding, and it feels like such a partnership with the planner and the organization to take it. I love the name of this, behind the mic, right? Because it's the stuff that attendees won't be privy to the whole conversation back and forth, but they get to experience it, to your point, Kris, which I think is better than talking about it, is to suddenly look around. So anyway, stories. Let's start with, I got to speak in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And it's sometimes hard to find out the hotels or the resorts sustainability plan, like what they have in place, especially if they aren't very far along. And this place was not. So I'm trying marketing, I'm trying all that, but nobody could tell me, but everyone knew about Charles. Charles came from down the road. There's a developmentally disabled adult workshop kind of place. And for 25 years, Charles has been coming to this resort and sorting the recycling. Everybody knew him. Everybody knew the story, except the attendees would never have known that. And the feeling when you go to throw something away and there's the recycling, there's trash, and hopefully there's compost, and it's all mixed up, and you think we're sunk. This is never going to work.
Yep.
So I got to tell the audience, the attendees, guess what? I know you probably felt that same way, but guess what? There's a guy named Charles that everybody knows and everybody loves. And what he's doing at the end of every day is sorting out and making sure that the things that can recycled get recycled. Wow. So we get to start sharing these stories, right? And then when I worked with Helms Briscoe here in Minnesota, we had an event at the Radisson Blu. And so I do some research on the hotel too, to see, what are they doing? So I can maybe brag about them or just stay quiet if there's not a lot to say. But they're way ahead of the game at Radisson Blu. They have something called a Carbon X machine, and it takes all the what would have been emissions from the hot water heaters, captures it, turns it into pearl ash. Don't ask me how, don't ask me what that is, but it becomes a bar of soap instead of a greenhouse gas emission. Wow. And when you wash yourself, it does not release the carbon into the air. It's like done. And so I got to brag about them. Helms Briscoe did a lot of the different things that we talked about, like they changed up their name tags. Instead of just using stickers or those darn things we can't ever recycle, they came up with creative ways to make name tags that are recyclable. We went full in on this, so I got to brag about them. They got a fair amount of money back from me as a percentage of my speaking fee, but they wanted me to donate it to the charity that was a part of the event they were doing. Wow. So wins in every direction. And then just last week, I was in a different part, in Boise, Idaho. And this group, they didn't have a lot of time, right, to do the planning ahead with me. So they did a few little things, and they checked off because the other column is what I'll do next time. And they chalked off a whole bunch of those. So they're going to get a donation anyway, just because it's coming. But one of the things I got to brag about them about was that we're all seated, we're doing the keynote. And I said, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's glasses instead of plastic cups, and they're off to the side where there's a pitcher of water. Instead of pre-pouring every single person's glass at every single place, whether people are sitting there or not. Because I said to the group, what do you think happens? They're like, oh my gosh, right, it just gets dumped out.
Mm.
So it's an easy kind of, like you said, Kris, experiential teaching method that all helps us be a part of this together. And to me, that's where the hope comes from, not individual actions. I mean, you do it to feel better, but it's not going to make a change like a collective action will.
Wow.
Right.
That is so amazing. And it does, like, I've even experienced it in my own events that I'm planning. If you look at the entire mountain of things, it feels insurmountable. But like you're sharing with us, there are such creative ways to find solutions. And what an amazing experience for the team to go through, and how they may think differently for every single event to come. So while it feels sometimes like this is insurmountable, it really feels like what you bring to the table for them, amongst so many things, is that we can hold to believing change is possible. Can you talk a little bit to that, and maybe how you've seen people shift in their mindset?
Yeah. And what we found is that if you make a few changes, you find out, oh, that wasn't that hard. And those changes then stick. And then you make the next changes, right? So you could look at that checklist and think this is impossible, but it's like, well, how many could we do for this one? And what about the next event? And pretty soon it really blossoms. And I had one other event where they weren't even aware of sustainable speaking piece. And I was with them, showed up to do the sound check. And they're saying, oh my gosh, help yourself to lunch. There's so much food. And I looked, it was like 5 minutes before the lunch break was over. And the hotel had just added mountains of food into every tray. And I said, well, you know what's going to happen to that? There's no composting here. So that's going to landfill, which becomes a greenhouse gas emission. And I pointed out just a few more things. And pretty soon they were like, well, wait a minute, we could do this, right? It sort of sparks it. And once we're engaged and thinking about it, now we're off and running. And I will just say, yes, individually, impossible. We need to make systemic changes. However, the meetings and events industry, we can have a huge impact. Imagine as we move forward and we start saying, I can't work with this hotel because there's no way to donate the extra food, or at a minimum compost it. What if it needs to be centrally located? You need to be able to have shuttles so people aren't driving individually to the various events outside of the main event. There's so many things we can do. We can be pressuring the airlines industry. When they're going for sustainable fuel, we say, yeah, and we'll be recommending your airlines if you'll be doing, we'll start using only that. There are ways to move it forward. And yes, it's huge. And I'm not Pollyanna about it. We have a massive shift to make, and it's go time, right? We can't just fiddle around with it. But I'm excited to be a part of the meetings industry because I know we can really move the dial.
Oh, speaking of that, I know you want to do more for the meetings events industry, and I just couldn't be more excited about that. And I know that they're in desperate need of support and help and education and all of those things. Do you have a keynote specifically? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but specifically ready for meeting professionals? I think your ideas and encouragement, if you're anything you're encouraging on this topic, could be really powerful. And I'm imagining it being delivered at one of our big industry associations, of which there are many. So there was a multi-pronged question there, but.
Yeah. And again, I would weave it with leadership or whatever other pieces they want, and then bring in this element that really gets in for the meeting industry, the things we can do. And I think of meeting planners as like the master multitaskers, right? I don't know how I have no idea. What I love about my work is I get to come in and do one thing and focus on it to the very best of my ability. And that is my strength. It is not the thousands of details that you all hold and carry at all moments. So is there time for you in the midst of all that to also research all the sustainability pieces? Maybe, but probably not. So I'll do it. I'm willing to do that. And I'm fascinated by it and like doing it. So if I have the chance to speak to the meeting industry, then we do dig into it. And we could do an entire keynote about how do we do this in a more sustainable way? How do we sustain ourselves? How do we sustain hope? Wild hope, I would call it, in the midst of all. And that's because I believe we will never get there from a place of shoulds and shames and ought tos. It's just, none of us respond well to that. This is about falling in love with this place we call home and taking care of our home, because we will act, we'll protect what we love. And so my encouragement, whether you can get out into a park or a forested area or literally just getting outside, if we tune into something in the outdoors and let ourselves love it, the rest of it, then you want to. then you want to be able to make change and protect this place and that bird you saw or whatever. I know it sounds kind of way out there, but I live it most every day, right?
Mhm.
I recognize when I let myself really love it without reservation, I want to make these changes. And I think that's how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
That is
Wow.
so beautiful.
I know. I don't hear anybody else talking about it the way you talk about it. And I really, really appreciate that from you. Thank you, Kris.
You were so amazing. I was also going to ask, since we have a few minutes, just in case people don't know, and it's so much more fun to hear from you directly, can you talk a little bit about your keynotes, Wild Leadership and Wild at Work? Just would love to hear a little bit about those.
Of course, yes. One of my favorite topics.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the chance to get to speak to various organizations. The beauty of this is that with Wild as the overarching theme, then we dig into Wild Leadership or Wild at Work. And like I said, we'll look at being wildly present, wildly original, and wildly welcoming. The good news for me is that I use the stories from my sled dogs, and it answers all of the questions. Or no matter, there's just not a time when I've done a pre-event call with someone and not, okay, that's going to be this dog or this story or this whatever. They just fit everywhere. So in the speaking world, they say you're supposed to pick a lane, like become really known in, say, finance and get really expert in that. And for me, I never did. And I'm glad, because I love the breadth. I love learning about the different organizations. In this past 3 weeks, I've spoken to departments of education, a software company, healthcare association, like this whole big broad view, but we have some commonality here, right? And that's the part I love to talk to. And the dogs, they're just universal. There are stories about their personalities and how you work with the dog that isn't a very good puller, or the one who's always crabby, or how do we stay present when we're just in destructive busy mode? How do we get to productive busy? It just goes on. And I've reached a level in my speaking where I have a basic outline, but I can also adjust based on what I'm noticing from the group after I've already customized with the event planner. And one of my favorite poets, David White, has a quote that I love. And he says, good speech is half what you want to say and half what is listened out of you. And that to me is just the wild sweet spot, is to get to be in that with whoever the group is. And together, the reciprocity of it, together we form this experience that is really moving and as energizing to me as it is for the group.
So well said. And I feel like that is the most perfect segue into to really finish this out, given that of all the incredible things you are also a poet yourself. And we've heard that you have a poem you specifically wrote for this topic today. And so if you'd be willing to share it, we thought that could be a really fun way to finish out.
Yeah, I wrote it this morning, actually.
Oh, so cool.
I was thinking about today and everyone. I mean, it's not an unusual question to say, how do we not lose hope in all this? So I went for a walk, and here's what happened. When the press of humans and our panicked frailty are just too much to bear, and it feels as though nothing could break through the chatter and commotion we cause, there are portals quietly waiting for us to enter. They take many forms, these openings, these passages that take us beyond our usual understandings. Portals are not free of charge. They ask us first to see, to notice them, then to shed our protective layers and enter in, willing to be moved, be that to tears or to action, to awe or perhaps to stillness. For me today, it was the pelicans. I couldn't have said how much I needed it. So far in the tangles was I. But hundreds of these graceful beings circling, then landing together in the river, took my breath, inviting me to see, to feel, to fully love. As far as I can tell, portals reside in experiences, in opportunities to lose ourselves and join with something bigger, more expansive than our individual skin could hold. We won't get out of the many troubles of our time by trying to do it right, from shoulds or shame or withholding. Portals suggest a different approach, one that opens our hearts and all of our senses to the wild beauty of this world, one that dares you not to give up, but to let yourself love with knee-buckling abandon. It's risky, to be sure. It will hurt sometimes, but it allows for hope and the wild possibilities that we cannot see in our separateness.
Wow.
I just
Oh,
have to make a comment beyond thank you. And that was so touching. But for all the planners out there or producers that might be watching, that is a really amazing way to kick off a session, to wrap up a session, to,
Put a
I
dog to
don't know, yeah, to add into one of your videos about the event. Things like that always spark my imagination to take, you know, to just layer in
Yes.
message and emotion, yeah, into your experiences. Thank you for doing that, Kris. That was amazing.
also the fact that you wrote that this morning.
There's that. I was on a walk and here's what happened.
Wow. It is. It's such a way to make us like to level set and all feel connected at this event or this experience. So I am so inspired. You are absolutely incredible. I'm serious. I will be reaching out about the women's trips. You are amazing. And thank you so much for taking the time to share more with us. I think we have so much good context here of the conversations that can happen behind the mic. So thank you again for joining us.
Yes.
Well, thank you
I
both.
feel hopeful. I didn't feel hopeful this morning about this subject. You got me there.
Amazing.
Thanks,
Well,
Kris.
we will see you soon. And bye, Summit. Bye, Kris. Day for day. See ya. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, he is so amazing.
So good. I know. I mean, honestly, when Kris arrives somewhere to do her speaking, regardless of what kind of group, you know, the audiences are made up of humans and they all fall in love. And
Absolutely.
they leave knowing what actions to take, which I think is about all you can ask from a speaker, really.
Exactly. We know every time what is that audience going to leave with? That's the question that we and our planners and the teams are asking to make people feel hopeful. So I love the wild hope phrase she used. That's really cool.
Me too.
Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Kris, for bringing Kris to our Behind the Mic series. We can go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah, we're you got to stay tuned, folks, for our next one. We can't quite announce it today, but watch for that. We'll be able to do that real soon, and it's going to be one you're not going to want to miss. Very, very exciting stuff. It's fun to watch where we go.
Exactly.
With these topics and speakers, and mostly what we're trying to do is bring you. We keep saying it, but more the surprises, the things that you don't know about that speaker just from doing your own research on their website and their promo video. So be in the know, stay tuned. We can't wait to see you next time.
Amazing. Until then, see you, Kris.
Bye.
Bye.